I hope you all had a great week this week. I want to begin this week by talking to you about what went on with Iran. We killed Suleimani. Suleimani was a terrorist. He was an identified terrorist, and the group that he was a part of was a designated terrorist organization. Now, what that means is that they should essentially consider themselves as having a target on the back, like a wanted poster up for them saying, wanted, dead or alive. That is what that is the equivalent of when they are designated terrorists or designated terrorist organizations. He was the head of that. He was responsible for killing hundreds of U.S. service members, which I've outlined in great detail, and it is my personal belief that every one of those service members that he was responsible for killing is the justification for removing him from this world. I believe that the world is a much safer place without him, and I also believe that that was not a step toward war. That is a step toward preventing war, because when you take that actor off the battlefield who is that chief instigator that has gone for years and years and years attacking the United States of America in various places, killing our service members, and most recently working to overtake our embassy in Iraq, that is a path that leads us towards war. Removing that person, that is a step in the right direction. It is absolutely what needed to happen. We wouldn't go out there and argue that taking bin Laden off of the battlefield and killing him in Pakistan was a step towards war with Pakistan. That's not the case. We were eliminating a terrorist target. It needed to happen, and that's all that I'm going to speak about on that front, other than to say that I am not a person that seeks war. I understand the consequences of war as well as anybody out there, and I pray for the day that all of our service members, men and women, return home for the last time. I know that we're not necessarily close to that with all of the things that go on around in this world, but I pray for that day and I look forward to that day. I want to switch gears here now. This week, the Army Corps of Engineers, they testified before Congress in a hearing that was held by the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. It's one of the two committees that I sit on. Now, for those that might have missed it, I had the opportunity to ask Lieutenant General Todd Semonite a number of important questions regarding the management of Lake Okeechobee, both last year, 2019, and moving forward into 2020. Now, as you know, in 2019, for just the third time in 12 years, our communities were spared toxic discharges from Lake Okeechobee as a result of not keeping Lake Okeechobee artificially high prior to hurricane season. Now, I understand that there was no guarantee at any point during the summer that we could guarantee no release from Lake Okeechobee and stop any and all discharges. But I truly believe that any day that we work through the summer where we prevent a discharge, we have had a victory for that day. Every inch, every foot of water that we take off of Lake Okeechobee, it's that much more distance from us having a toxic discharge. It gets us that much closer to the end of hurricane season, that much closer to the end of summer, so that we can have a whole summer without discharges, or at minimum, maybe just a couple days of discharges if that's what needs to happen. Hopefully none. That's what I pray for. That's what I work for. But every day that we prevent them, that's one less day that we have to worry about them in the summertime. And that's what we're trying to work at. Now, that protected our communities from discharges. It protected communities around the lake from flood risk and ensured that everyone had the water that they needed. And we shouldn't just glance over that as a point, because when you think about why it is that discharges happen, and another threat to human life, that is the threat to those people that live around the southern rim of Lake Okeechobee, those communities that if the Herbert Hoover Dike has water that reaches too high of level around it, that dike could breach and people could die. That is a serious threat. That should never be overlooked. That's what the Army Corps is going out there and defending against when they have those discharges. And my point in all of this is that the Army Corps should not allow those lake levels to get to emergency levels where they only have a couple of days to get rid of that water before that potential failure of the Herbert Hoover Dike. And that's what managing the lake level lower moving into hurricane season is all about. It's not about wanting anybody to not have water. And thankfully, and we shouldn't glance over this as well, everybody that needed water supply got every bit of water supply that they were requesting this past summer. Now, in the hearing this week, Lieutenant General Semonite of the Corps of Engineers made a very important statement to me when he said, and I quote, "Preventing discharges from Lake Okeechobee is definitely a stated mission of the Army Corps of Engineers. Now, I'm going to be working to make sure that that now stated mission of the Army Corps of Engineers is a written mission of the Corps of Engineers that cannot be denied. Again, we're going to be working to have that put into the Water Resources and Development Act upcoming in this year. The significance of this distinction, it cannot be understated, because for the first time on record, the Army Corps of Engineers has made it clear that preventing toxic discharges containing harmful algal blooms is officially a clear and defined mission to be pursued. That is not what their policy was in the past. This all came about as a result of having the EPA identify that there is a level of microcystin and cyanobacteria that human beings should not come in contact with. As a result of having General Spellman previously identify that, yes, in fact, the Corps of Engineers has discharged toxic water into our Florida coast, albeit that nobody was alerted to the fact that those were toxic waters. Many of us knew to be wary of that, but we were not literally told that they were toxic waters. And to have this change, this is very, very important. It did not happen on accident. It's a huge turnaround from what we saw just over a year ago when we started our fight to rewrite the Lake Okeechobee regulation schedule, also known as LORS. Now it's going to be known in the future as LOSOM, the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual. Now, when the Army Corps would not even make public health a priority, that's what was going on at the time. That's the change that has occurred. Now, it's really, to me, it's quite amazing what a difference a year can make. Unfortunately, these things often go, we take one step forward and there can be two steps back, and it really frustrates each and every one of us who pay such close attention to this. Colonel Kelly, he announced that the Corps' focus in the new year would be to retain water during the dry season. Specifically, their plan would be to keep Lake Okeechobee to 12 feet heading into the hurricane season, which in my opinion is too high. It completely flies in the face of every lesson that we learned last year, that at that 11-foot mark, everybody can still get the water supply that they need. That if we would have managed Lake Okeechobee a foot higher, had Lake Okeechobee been 12 feet as Category 5 Hurricane Dorian barreled towards our coast, our communities would have been in serious danger. The dike would have been in serious danger. The Corps would have had no choice but to discharge massive amounts of water laden with algal blooms in an effort to lower the lake into our community to preserve the Herbert Hoover Dike and its integrity so that they could save the lives of people around the rim of that dike in those rim communities. Thankfully, this didn't have to happen, which is exactly why it's clear that the Army Corps is taking the wrong approach, in my opinion, in 2020. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. We need shared adversity. It is absolutely critical that we work together to ensure that Lake O, it's not kept artificially high during the dry season to allow for greater flexibility during the months of heavy rainfall. It's called the rainy season. It's called hurricane season for a reason, because that is what historically happens there. Now, this 2020 plan by the Corps of Engineers, it's just the latest misstep in management that will keep the lake, as I've said already, artificially high, leaving our coastal communities and the communities south of the lake that have to worry about dike breach. It leaves us all at increased risk. Now, one of the other things that I haven't shown on video yet, but we'll probably show it on video at another point. At a different point in our hearing with the Corps of Engineers this week, General Semonite very specifically outlined to some of the other members that were asking questions as a part of that committee that there are different levels of priority as it relates to the missions of the Corps of Engineers. And if there is a part of their mission that has to do with life and limb, flood control, that is supposed to reach the highest level of their priority. And if the Corps of Engineers is not working to keep Lake Okeechobee at a level where it does not reach emergency levels in advance of getting into hurricane season, they are not treating that issue in the appropriate way, in my opinion. Now is the time to build on the success of 2019, not go back to the way that things were. The health of our communities, our estuaries, and our environment, they depend on it. And unfortunately, there was another bad piece of the puzzle that we uncovered recently. Now, as we discovered in the Department of Florida's Agriculture, Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried, she has appointed 2 United States Sugar Corporation lobbyists to represent her with the Army Corps of Engineers as they rewrite the rules that determine how to manage Lake Okeechobee. Now, to me, this is a perfect example of the fox guarding the hen house. And Commissioner Fried is spending taxpayer dollars to make this happen. These are paid individuals. It is a disgrace, so I'm calling on their removal from the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual Project Delivery Team immediately. In this, Commissioner Fried is giving U.S. Sugar the kind of access and influence that the rest of the citizens in our state and our communities that they don't have, which is completely unacceptable, especially considering that U.S. Sugar has sued the Army Corps of Engineers seeking to, and I quote, rein in their rogue operations. In other words, they are suing the Army Corps to prevent the Army Corps from managing Lake Okeechobee 1 ounce lower, not 1 inch lower, not 1/4 of an inch lower. They do not want Lake Okeechobee managed 1 inch lower at all, even if it means protecting those communities from flood, even if it means protecting communities from toxic discharges, because that is exactly what they are. Now, this level of special interest access is a cycle of corruption. So I'm urging Commissioner Fried to break the cycle, work with us to fix the public health and water quality issues facing our state. We all know that this fight is far from over. My promise to you is this: as we move into 2020, I will continue to fight to find a path forward that protects our communities without subjecting our communities to harmful discharges. I will look forward to holding the Corps, the Commissioner, and anybody else accountable for their end of this deal. I will hold them all responsible. I will work to reduce the risk to those that are living in the rim around Lake Okeechobee, and I will work to make sure that there's adequate water supply for every person out there that needs it. These are very difficult balances that need to take place, but I am committed to working on them because they can all lead to very important states of emergency that none of us want to see occur. Now, on that note, I hope that you all have a great weekend ahead. As always, it is an honor to represent you here in Washington, D.C. as your member of Congress. I look forward to seeing you all around town. Y'all take care.